Hey, what's up? Welcome back to your channel name. This time, we're going to dive into a story that will make you think twice before walking alone at night. Grab some snacks, turn off the lights, and listen closely. Elliot Van Dyke's life had started to feel like a blank canvas, smudged and scribbled on too many times. After years of working as an artist in Brussels and burning out from endless gallery deadlines, he decided to step away from it all. Far away from the city noise, back to a place that once felt strange, but now called to him quietly and persistently. His late grandmother's house in the small, remote village of Virion. Nestled at the edge of the Ardennes forest, Virion never quite felt warm, not even in the height of summer. Elliot remembered visiting the house as a child, just a handful of times. What stuck with him wasn't the warm milk his grandmother made or the scent of dried lavender hanging over every doorway, it was the way the house seemed to watch him. Quietly. Patiently. After his grandmother passed, the house was left untouched. Nobody in the family ever talked about selling it. It was as if they all silently agreed to forget it existed. But now, as Elliot stood on the cusp of emotional collapse, it was as if the house had been gently calling him back for years. Not just because of inheritance, but something else, something harder to explain. Like an invisible string pulling at his thoughts. The drive from Brussels took about 3 hours. The closer he got to Virion, the taller the trees grew, and the fog began to thicken, wrapping around the car like curious fingers. The air felt heavier, almost as if the forest carried the weight of secrets too old to forget. When he finally arrived at the gate, it creaked with age and rust, revealing a 2-story Flemish Gothic house with faded paint, moss-covered bricks, and windows that hadn't seen light in decades. Elliot stood still for a while, gazing at the place. Then, a crow cawed loudly from a tree near the back of the house, snapping him out of his daze. He stepped forward, not knowing that from the moment he crossed that threshold, something inside the house, something very old, had already begun to awaken. The last time Elliot had visited this house, he was 9 years old. The news of his grandmother's death had come suddenly. The funeral was brief, hushed. Afterward, no one mentioned the house again. Any time Elliot asked, his parents brushed it off with the same vague response: she died peacefully in her sleep. Nothing to talk about. Now that he was back inside, the air felt thick with dust, wood rot, and the kind of silence that isn't truly quiet. The floor groaned with every step he took. Cobwebs stretched between curtain rods, and the furniture looked frozen in time, as if someone had left it all behind mid-sentence. But the deeper he went into the house, the more it felt unwilling. As if the walls themselves didn't want him there. Or maybe they did, but only for reasons he wouldn't understand yet. Upstairs, the hallway stretched long and narrow, ending with a series of doors that remained shut. He stepped into what had once been his grandmother's room. Everything was still there. The bed was made. Her perfume bottles and ivory comb sat untouched on the vanity. But what unsettled him most was the mirror, tall, dusty, and cracked at the corner. He caught a glimpse of his reflection, but something felt off. It didn't quite move at the same speed he did. A chill crept along the back of his neck. He told himself it was just the cold, just the damp air. But deep down, he knew this house wasn't just abandoned. It had been sealed off, left alone for a reason no one had ever wanted to say out loud. That first night, Elliot settled into a small guest room downstairs. He lit the old fireplace and did his best to relax. The forest wind whispered through the window cracks, and for a while, he found comfort in the rustic quiet. Until the clock hit 11 p.m. At first, the noise was faint. A slow, heavy creaking sound from above. He froze. The ceiling groaned, followed by what unmistakably sounded like footsteps. Not random creaks, but actual, deliberate steps. Heavy. Measured. As if someone was pacing directly above him. His brain rushed to find explanations. Maybe the wood was settling. Maybe animals. But no animal walked like that, slow, steady, and angry. The steps paused, stopping right above his room. There was a long silence. Then, the sound of deep breathing, low and drawn out. Elliot lay still, heart pounding, every muscle tensed. The breathing stopped after a minute. Just as he was about to convince himself it was his imagination, the sound returned, this time at 3 a.m. sharp. There was a dragging noise. Something heavy being pulled across the attic floor. He didn't move. He didn't dare breathe too loudly. He just stared at the ceiling, wide-eyed, counting down the seconds until daylight. By morning, the fog was still thick around the house. Elliot wandered into the kitchen, eyes heavy from lack of sleep. He reached for the coffee pot, and that's when he saw it. Hanging from a nail in the wall, right next to the spice rack, was an old iron key. It hadn't been there yesterday. He was certain of it. He'd cleaned that shelf himself, scrubbing off dust and dead moths. The key was large, cold to the touch, with patches of reddish-brown corrosion. Etched into its side was something strange, a Roman numeral 13, and beneath it, a small, eye-like symbol. Elliot stared at it for a long time. Something about the key felt familiar. Not in the way you recognize a thing, but in the way something once seen in a dream comes back to you years later. His thoughts drifted to the attic, the one place in the house he'd never seen. Always locked. Always off limits. His grandmother had once scolded him for even touching the attic door. His father refused to talk about it. And now, after decades of silence, this key appeared, quiet, waiting. The attic entrance was hidden at the end of the upstairs hallway. The door was smaller than the others, nearly blending into the wall. As a child, Elliot had always felt drawn to it but was warned never to go near. That warning echoed in his mind as he stood before it again, this time with the rusted key in hand. The wood was brittle, the hinges rusted stiff. The handle looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Elliot inserted the key. It turned easily. A soft, satisfying click broke the silence. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase leading into darkness. The air that poured out was cold and stale, carrying a smell of forgotten things, mothballs, dust, and something sour, like rotting paint. He turned on his flashlight and ascended slowly. The attic was larger than he remembered. White sheets draped over piles of furniture like ghosts in hiding. Cobwebs clung to the rafters. Then he saw it. In the far corner, propped against the wall, was a large canvas. It wasn't covered like the others. It stood bare, bold, and waiting. The painting depicted a woman. Pale. Eyes sharp. And her mouth, twisted in a grin that didn't feel like joy. It felt like mockery. Like a secret she refused to share. The woman in the painting was laughing. And somehow, Elliot knew that laugh had never stopped, not even after death. The moment Elliot laid eyes on the painting, something in his chest tightened. The woman's face was unfamiliar, but her presence stirred something buried deep in his memory. She wore an old-fashioned black dress, buttoned up to the neck, and her pale skin glowed against the dark background. Her eyes were lifeless, but not empty. Instead, they were filled with something far more disturbing, intent. It wasn't just the painting's eerie beauty or the disturbing grin. It was how the grin seemed, personal. Like she had been waiting for him to return, to find her, to look. And now that he had, she wouldn't let him look away. Even when he turned around, walked back down the attic steps, and shut the door behind him, he still saw that grin behind his eyelids. All morning, Elliot tried to shake the image out of his head, distracting himself by scrubbing the bathroom, checking old boxes, and trying to make sense of years of dust and decay. But every few minutes, he'd glance toward the ceiling, as if something, or someone, was moving above. That night, he didn't sleep. The painting had planted a seed in his mind, and he could feel its roots spreading. When Elliot finally drifted into sleep, it wasn't restful. It felt more like being pulled under black water. There was no softness. No forgetting. Just cold, and then her. In the dream, he stood in the attic again. The same dim lighting. The same air heavy with silence. But now, the painting was gone. In its place stood the woman, alive, breathing, and smiling that same crooked grin. Her eyes bore into his. She didn't move. She didn't speak. But her presence crushed the air around him. Elliot wanted to run, but his legs wouldn't move. She stepped closer, slow, like a predator savoring the moment before the kill. Her voice finally came, not from her mouth, but from everywhere at once. "You've seen me now." He tried to scream but no sound escaped. She raised one hand and reached out toward his face. As her fingers brushed his cheek, the cold sank deep into his bones. He woke up gasping, drenched in sweat, throat raw as if he'd been screaming for hours. The attic door, he noticed immediately, was cracked open. He swore he'd closed it. Elliot didn't want to go back to the attic. Every instinct screamed for him to leave the house, pack up, and never look back. But curiosity, or maybe something deeper, more irrational, pulled him upward again. The door creaked louder than before. The air was colder. But what shocked him wasn't the temperature, it was the painting. It had moved. Yesterday, it had stood against the far wall. Today, it leaned near the top of the attic stairs, as if waiting for him the moment he opened the door. And now, the woman's expression had changed. It was subtle, but it was there. The smile was wider. The eyes were more focused. He knelt down, inspecting the floor. Dust and grime had been disturbed. The wooden planks bore faint streaks, as if the canvas had dragged itself across them during the night. There were no signs of animals. No footprints. No wind strong enough to move something that heavy. And the worst part? The back of the canvas now had a handprint, small, feminine, and smudged with what looked like soot or dried blood. For the rest of the day, Elliot couldn't escape her. Every reflective surface seemed to betray him. In the bathroom mirror, he caught the edge of her face peeking just over his shoulder. In the window by the kitchen sink, she appeared for a brief moment, her lips curling into that same knowing smile before vanishing with the wind. He began to avoid looking directly at anything that could reflect. He covered mirrors, closed the blinds, and dimmed the lights. But still, she found ways to appear. In the steam of the shower glass. In the TV screen when it went black. Once, while walking past a hallway mirror he'd draped with a blanket, the entire fabric shifted, as if something behind it had breathed. His mind started slipping. Food lost its taste. Time became unreliable. Hours passed in seconds, or minutes felt like days. He wrote down everything he saw, trying to convince himself it was just sleep deprivation. But one thing remained consistent. She was getting closer. Elliot had avoided the basement until now. It had always been the coldest part of the house, full of rusted tools and moldy boxes. But something told him the answers had to be down there, beneath the surface, where old memories were buried with dust and shame. He found the journals in a sealed tin box, tucked beneath old linen and faded photographs. Dozens of them, handwritten in his grandmother's shaky cursive. Most were harmless, recipes, gardening notes, old village gossip. But one journal, bound in black leather, was different. It didn't have a title, just the initials MV on the first page. Inside, the entries shifted in tone, less structured, more frantic. And one particular entry, dated February 13, 1961, chilled him to his core. She came again last night. Stood by the mirror. Smiling. Laughing with no sound. The painting must remain covered. Do not let her see you seeing her. Do not let her know you believe in her. She wants to be seen. That's how she survives. Elliot stared at the page, heart pounding. Somewhere above him, a door creaked. And then the laugh, dry, breathy, and distant, echoed from the attic. Elliot took every precaution before bed. He bolted the attic door, jammed it with a chair, and even placed a line of salt across the threshold. It was absurd, he knew. But he was beyond logic now, operating purely on survival instinct. Still, sleep eluded him. The night dragged on, heavy with silence, the kind that felt watched. But eventually, exhaustion claimed him. He woke at 3:11 a.m., a cold breeze brushing his face. The room was dark, but he sensed something wrong before his eyes adjusted. The attic door was open. Not just cracked, but wide open. The chair had been pushed aside, neatly, not knocked over. The line of salt. Completely undisturbed, as if someone had stepped over it deliberately. He crept toward the stairs with a flashlight, heart thudding in his chest. Every creak beneath his feet felt like a scream. When he reached the attic, he froze. The painting was gone. The corner where it once leaned now stood empty, the dust on the floor perfectly clean in a rectangular outline, like it had never been there at all. Except, he knew it had. And now it was somewhere else. Somewhere closer. He found it downstairs. It hadn't been there the night before, and no one else had access to the house. Yet, there it was, mounted cleanly above the old brick fireplace, framed like a centerpiece. The painting was pristine, the canvas smooth, the frame dustless, as if it had been waiting for this exact wall for decades. And the woman's face. It had changed again. Her smile had faded. Now she looked angry. Or worse, disappointed. Her eyes had narrowed. Her head was tilted slightly to one side, as if studying him with contempt. Like he had failed a test he didn't know he was taking. The whole room felt wrong. The air was thicker, harder to breathe. Even the firewood beneath the hearth, wood that hadn't been touched in years, smelled faintly burnt. Elliot backed away, unable to look at her. But even with his back turned, he could feel her eyes on him, following him out of the room. He didn't sleep that night. He just listened to the house settling, but the creaks were too rhythmic, too intentional. Like footsteps pacing just behind the walls. The mail came late, tossed lazily through the slot as usual. But among the bills and junk, one envelope stood out. No return address. Old paper. Handwritten. Inside, a single sentence scrawled in black ink. She knows who you are. That was it. No name. No explanation. Elliot stared at the note for hours. Every word felt like a threat, though none were direct. He read it over and over again, wondering who she truly was. The woman in the painting? The one from the dreams? Was there a difference anymore? The handwriting didn't match his grandmother's journals. It looked rushed, almost scratched into the paper. The ink had bled through slightly, suggesting it had been written under pressure. Or panic. The letter smelled faintly of something floral, but rotting. Like dried roses soaked in vinegar. And at the bottom corner of the envelope, barely visible, was a smudge. A fingerprint. Small. Feminine. Elliot tried to ignore it at first. It began with faint scratching. Just one wall. Then another. Soon, it echoed through the entire house, like tiny nails raking wood from the inside out. He banged on the wall. The sound stopped, for a moment. Then it returned, louder, more aggressive. He pressed his ear to the plaster and heard something worse than scratching. Breathing. Shallow, uneven, but real. Not wind. Not pipes. Breathing. Close, just on the other side of the wall, where nothing should be. Then came the whispering. Too soft to make out, like dozens of voices all speaking at once, overlapping in a language he didn't understand. It wasn't coming from outside. It was inside the house. Inside the walls. He tore open one panel in a panic, thinking maybe there was an animal. But inside, there was only insulation, dust, and something carved into the wood. MV was here. His grandmother's initials. By the next morning, the house was no longer the same. The dining room chairs had moved. Not just pushed out of place, but carefully arranged in a perfect circle facing the center of the room. The old cuckoo clock that hadn't worked in years ticked once, just once, then stopped, hands frozen at 3:11 a.m., the same time Elliot woke to the attic door open. Even worse, the photographs had changed. He had barely noticed it at first. But one by one, the faces in the framed family portraits had gone missing. Not faded, removed. Cut or scratched out completely, leaving only silhouettes or empty space where eyes should be. One photo, of his grandmother as a child, now had something new, a shadow behind her shoulder that wasn't there before. A tall figure. Blurred. But unmistakably female. Elliot didn't know if he was losing his mind, or if the house itself was peeling back layers, revealing things that had always been there. But one thing was certain now. She was no longer confined to the painting. Desperation had finally pushed Elliot past the line of fear. He dragged the painting outside just before dawn. The sun hadn't fully risen, and the frost still clung to the grass. He stacked dry logs and doused the painting in lighter fluid. His hands shook as he struck the match. The fire roared to life quickly, but the canvas didn't burn. The flames licked around it, crackling high and hot. The frame darkened, warped, but the image of the woman remained untouched. Her eyes, her face, her expression, it was as if the fire couldn't see her. Or refused to. The air turned sour, thick with the scent of burning chemicals and decay. Then, the wind shifted. Elliot stumbled back, coughing, eyes watering. The fire died in a sudden gust, smothered as if by unseen hands. When the smoke cleared, the painting lay there, still whole. Still watching. And now, the woman's hand in the image was raised, as if waving hello. Or warning him. By now, Elliot couldn't remember when he last slept. Every shadow seemed alive. Every sound twisted into something darker in his ears. He went back to the basement, not out of curiosity, but instinct. Something was calling him there. While pacing, he accidentally kicked a corner of an old rug, revealing the edge of rotting wood beneath it. Curious, he pulled the rug aside. A square outline. A small metal ring, rusted but intact. A trapdoor. It was barely visible unless someone was looking for it. Heart racing, he pulled it open. A cold, stale draft rushed out like breath from a tomb. Below the trapdoor, a narrow stone staircase, descending into pitch-black darkness. The air smelled of mildew, iron, and something much older. Elliot hesitated, but only for a second. He grabbed a flashlight and stepped down into the dark, unaware that once the trapdoor closed above him, it wouldn't open again from the inside. The descent was slow. Each step groaned under his weight. The flashlight flickered twice but held. The walls were stone, damp with decades of forgotten time. At the bottom, he found a low, arched doorway. Beyond it, a small room, barely big enough to stand in. It looked like it hadn't been touched in over 60 years. Candles, burned down to wax puddles. A child's wooden rocking chair. And on one wall, drawn in what looked like faded chalk, a circle with strange symbols around it. But in the center of the room, leaning against the far wall, was another painting. The same woman. But this time, her face was younger. Less decayed. As if this was an earlier version of her, before the hate grew, before the corruption set in. Her hands were folded in prayer. Her eyes, closed. Written at the bottom of the canvas in faded ink. "Forgive me, Marie. I was only trying to keep you alive." Elliot's flashlight dimmed again. And behind him, footsteps. Near the second painting lay a box, weathered and moldy. Inside, a leather-bound book. Its pages stuck together with age, but still legible. It belonged to Henri Delacroix, a former resident of the house. The entries were disturbing. Henri wrote about his daughter, Marie, how she became ill, how no doctor could save her. And how, in desperation, he turned to something ancient. Something not meant to be disturbed. He performed a ritual. One that promised to preserve Marie's soul, keep her near. But the ritual was never meant for children. He wrote of how she changed. How her image began appearing in reflections. How she watched him from behind walls. How she smiled. Eventually, Henri sealed the room. Painted her portrait again and again, trying to trap her inside. But it was too late. Marie wasn't just haunting the house. She had become part of it. The final page was torn, but scrawled in shaky ink. If she sees you, she remembers. If she remembers, she returns. The flashlight died. At first, Elliot thought it was just the battery. But then he realized, the air had shifted. The room was colder. The silence, deeper. Like the house had exhaled, and now something else was breathing in. He reached for his phone, but it was dead too. Then the smell hit him. Rot. Mold. Perfume. He turned toward the doorway, and in the darkness, a faint glow began to appear. Two eyes. Not reflections, eyes. Watching. Motionless. Unblinking. And then, the soft sound of a child's humming. A melody, broken and off-key. Something once sweet, now corrupted. The second painting fell forward with a loud thud, as if pushed. And slowly, too slowly, a pale figure began to emerge from the shadows, her feet not touching the ground. She was no longer part of the canvas. She was real. Panic surged through his chest like fire. Elliot turned and sprinted up the stone staircase, 2 steps at a time, not daring to look back. The air behind him felt wrong, heavy like it was thickening into something that could grab him. He slammed into the trapdoor. Locked. He pushed, then shoved, then pounded with both fists. It didn't budge. The same door he had opened just hours before now felt like it was fused into the floor above. He screamed, no one answered. No echo. Just the soft hum of that terrible lullaby still drifting up from the room below. He banged again until his hands bled. The only response was a soft knock. From the other side. 3 knocks. Then silence. And behind him, bare feet gently touching the stone floor, 1 step at a time. He didn't turn around. Not at first. But then came the pressure, cold fingers brushing against the back of his neck, like ice melting straight into his spine. And suddenly, everything shifted. The basement was gone. He was standing in a small bedroom, sunlight outside, birds chirping. A little girl sat at a vanity, brushing her hair. Her face was pale, but alive. It was Marie. This was her memory. He watched, unable to move, as her father, Henri, entered the room carrying a cup. She smiled at him. Trusted him. Then drank. Within minutes, her body seized. She collapsed onto the floor, her legs twitching. Henri screamed, not in malice, but in horror. He didn't mean to kill her. The ritual had required the vessel cleansed in silence, and he had misunderstood. He tried to bring her back. Over and over. But all he did was trap her. The scene faded as fast as it had come, and Elliot collapsed to the floor, gasping. She had shown him everything. He didn't remember climbing out. But when he came to, Elliot was lying in the attic, back where this all began. Dust clung to his clothes. His head pounded like he had been asleep for days. And all around him, paintings. Dozens of them. Maybe more. All the same woman, Marie, in different poses, different ages. Some crying. Some screaming. Some with mouths sewn shut. Some with no face at all. He was in a gallery of her torment. And at the center of the room stood the original painting, restored again. Her face now calm. Serene. But there was something new. In the background of the painting, the house itself had appeared. And in the attic window of that painted house, was him, staring back out of the canvas. It was no longer a painting of her. It was watching him now. By sheer will, or some cruel mercy, the attic door opened again. He ran. He left everything. Bags, books, his grandmother's journals, none of it mattered anymore. The house didn't resist. In fact, it let him go. Which was somehow more terrifying. He drove through the foggy countryside until the trees thinned and the sky turned a soft, normal gray. When he reached a motel on the edge of town, he collapsed into bed. But rest didn't come. On the wall above the bed, a painting hung, some basic motel decor, a bowl of fruit or a vague landscape. But when he looked again, the painting had changed. A field. A house in the distance. And in the attic window, her face. She had followed. Not just the memory. The curse. 3 days passed in that motel. Elliot barely ate. Barely slept. The painting above the bed never changed back. He avoided looking at it, but sometimes, in the reflection of the TV screen or the bathroom mirror, he saw her. She was closer each time. Then came another letter. Slipped under the door. Same handwriting. Same paper. It read. She needs you to remember. Or she will never rest. And you will never leave. No signature. No explanation. But the message was clear. The haunting wasn't about terror. It was about remembrance. And something told him this wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Elliot didn't just inherit a house. He inherited a promise. And Marie was waiting for him to keep it. He thought leaving the house would be enough. But now, even in daylight, Marie followed. It started subtly. A glimpse in the motel's cracked bathroom mirror, her face just over his shoulder, eyes closed. When he turned, nothing. Then in the glass door at the gas station, her reflection, hand pressed against the inside, as if trying to get out. But when he looked directly, just a wall of snacks and soda. Every time he caught her in a reflection, she seemed closer. More solid. Like the longer he waited to do something, the more real she became. And worst of all, her eyes had begun to open. She was waking up. And Elliot had no idea what would happen once she did. The next town over had an old Catholic church, built in stone and silence. Elliot wasn't religious, but desperation made people pray in strange places. He brought Henry's journal and asked to speak to a priest. The old man listened politely, right until Elliot mentioned the name Delacroix. His expression hardened instantly. He stood up, took the journal, and tossed it into the fire by the altar without a word. Elliot shouted, tried to grab it, but the priest simply crossed himself and muttered, "She cannot be cleansed. The bloodline is sealed. You should not have opened that door." Before Elliot could ask more, the priest turned and walked away, vanishing into the shadows of the church. Elliot left shaken. If the church wouldn't help, who would? That night, sleep finally came, but brought no peace. Elliot dreamt of the house, but it was different now. Time had collapsed inside it. The roof was caving in. Ivy had strangled the walls. Every room was filled with dust and bones. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Some were adult-sized. Some were disturbingly small. The girl was there too. But she wasn't a ghost anymore. She was grown. Her face was beautiful, but wrong, unnaturally smooth, eyes too dark, smile too wide. She walked through the halls like a queen in her kingdom of rot. When Elliot tried to run, the floor crumbled beneath him, and he fell, deeper and deeper, until he landed back in the hidden room beneath the house. And in the corner, something crawled toward him. He woke up screaming, soaked in sweat, with bruises on his arms he didn't have before. The next morning, he tore his suitcase apart. Every item tied to the house, photos, notes, keys, letters, he dumped into a trash can and burned it behind the motel. He even drove an hour away to dispose of Henry's old painting he found hidden in the car trunk. He dumped it in a river. But when he returned to the motel, everything was back. The documents neatly placed on the nightstand. The painting leaned against the wall beside the bed. His grandmother's handwriting still fresh in the margins. It was as if nothing had been touched. Like the house itself had followed him. Elliot didn't know it yet, but he was part of it now. Just like Henri. Just like Marie. The police came just after sunrise. Elliot opened the door to red and blue lights, a screaming housekeeper, and a sheet-covered body. The motel clerk, a young guy named Adrian who had checked Elliot in a week ago, was found just outside Elliot's door, eyes wide open, mouth frozen in a silent scream. His body temperature was unnaturally low, even though the night hadn't been cold. The security footage showed him walking toward Elliot's room at 2:13 a.m., then stopping suddenly. Looking at something. Then falling. No one else appeared on the footage. No one at all. But Elliot knew. She had shown herself to someone else. And now, someone else was gone. The message was clear. There would be no more running. After the motel incident, Elliot couldn't sleep again. He searched through every belonging he had left, desperate for meaning, for direction. Anything. In the bottom of his duffel bag, wrapped in an old sweater, he found his grandmother's Bible. He almost didn't open it. But wedged between the pages of Psalms was a folded piece of brittle, yellowed paper. It was a letter. Addressed to him. Her handwriting was shaky, panicked. If you're reading this, then she's found you too. I tried to stop it. I tried to seal her inside. But the curse runs through the bloodline. I thought I broke it when I burned the room. I was wrong. Elliot's hands trembled. The girl is not just a spirit. She's a sentinel. A lock. And you, Elliot, you are the key. He couldn't breathe. What had his grandmother done? That night, Elliot stayed awake, terrified of what sleep might bring. But exhaustion won. He drifted off, and woke up at 3:17 a.m. in total silence. Not even the hum of the motel fridge. And she was there. Not in the mirror. Not in a dream. Standing at the foot of his bed. Marie. But it wasn't quite her anymore. Her eyes weren't just dark, they were empty, swirling with a fog that felt endless. Her skin was too smooth, like porcelain just before it cracks. Her fingers twitched unnaturally at her sides. And worst of all, she was smiling. Not sad. Not vengeful. Content. Like she had finally gotten what she wanted. Elliot blinked, and she vanished. But on the bedsheet, where she had stood, were two wet footprints. Bare. Small. And ice cold. Elliot didn't wait till morning. He packed up and ran. But as he reached the motel's parking lot, a loud boom shook the ground. Flames burst from the second floor. Screams followed. Fire spread like it was alive, swallowing the building in minutes. He ran back to help, but the heat was unbearable. By the time emergency crews arrived, the structure was almost gone. And as he watched the inferno, he noticed one terrifying detail. The room that burned hottest, the one that seemed to explode first, was his. But he'd taken everything with him. Which meant something had stayed behind. Or someone. While hiding out at a small diner 2 towns over, Elliot's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. But something told him to. The voice on the other end was calm. British. Older. Measured. He introduced himself as Dr. Julian Wren, a historian who had been researching the Delacroix family for decades. Said he had been tracking strange patterns, disappearances, fires, cursed properties, traced through Henry's bloodline. And when Elliot inherited the house, his name had triggered an alert in one of Julian's watch lists. Julian didn't sound surprised. He sounded relieved. "You survived the first phase," he said. Elliot asked him what that meant. Julian simply replied, "The house was the test. Now the real haunting begins." Julian sent coordinates. No address. A ruined chapel in the forest, nearly swallowed by nature. Overgrown, forgotten. The kind of place people pretend never existed. Elliot almost turned back 3 times, but something compelled him forward. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe Marie's influence. Inside the chapel, old pews lay in splinters. The altar was cracked straight down the middle. But on the far side of the room, hidden behind torn velvet curtains, was a staircase. Leading down. Into the dark. Julian was waiting below, with candles, books, maps, and a wall covered in Delacroix family trees. And at the center of it all, circled in red, Elliot's name. In the candlelit silence of the chapel's hidden chamber, Julian began to explain. The Delacroix family's curse wasn't just a result of haunting, it was a bargain. In 1702, Henry's ancestor, Lucien Delacroix, had stood before a pyre lit to burn accused witches during a mass execution near Ghent. But instead of watching the flames consume them, Lucien made a deal with something in the shadows, something older than religion. In exchange for protection and power, he offered a vessel, his bloodline. His descendants. Marie had been the first to carry the full weight of the curse. She died young, and violently. But her spirit didn't move on. It was bound. Julian showed Elliot a woodcut print, faded, but unmistakable. The face of the child drawn in ink centuries ago looked exactly like the one that had been haunting Elliot. Julian led Elliot deeper into the chapel's catacombs, until they reached a stone room sealed by iron bars. Inside it stood an ancient, 7-foot mirror. Its surface was covered in soot and cobwebs, but something shimmered beneath. Julian said it had been found under the Delacroix estate years ago and moved here for safekeeping. The mirror wasn't just a reflection. It was a doorway. According to Julian, it was through this mirror that the entity entered the family line. Marie wasn't just a ghost. She was a guardian of that doorway, trapped in a loop, repeating her pain through generation after generation, until someone finally broke the pattern. Or gave in. Julian warned him not to get too close. But Elliot felt drawn to the mirror, as if something inside it was calling his name. As he stepped forward, the reflection shifted. He saw himself, but behind him stood his grandmother. Then Henri. Then Marie. Then dozens of others he'd never seen, all with the same eyes, all part of the bloodline. All trapped. He blinked, and suddenly, he was looking out from inside the mirror, watching himself stare in. Then everything snapped back. Julian pulled him away just in time. But Elliot knew the truth now. This wasn't about a haunting anymore. This was about inheritance. Julian handed Elliot an old key wrapped in cloth. It looked like it had been buried for decades. "The house still stands," Julian said. "The fire didn't destroy its heart. Whatever you saw, it let you go." According to Julian, Henri had tried to seal the gateway permanently, but failed. Marie stopped him. Or maybe the entity inside her did. Now Elliot had to finish it. There was no other way. He could run, yes. But the curse would follow, through mirrors, through blood, through time. The house was still alive. And it was waiting. Just as Elliot reached the top of the stairs, ready to leave, a shattering sound echoed behind him. The mirror had cracked, on its own. One long jagged line ran from top to bottom. And behind the glass, just for a moment, Marie appeared again. Not angry. Not vengeful. Smiling. But this time, her lips moved. And even though there was no sound, Elliot heard it. Clear as a whisper in his mind. Come home. The candles blew out. And episode 1 ends, with Elliot standing at the threshold of something far older and darker than a haunted house. He knows now. This is only the beginning. That was our story for tonight. Do you think it's just an ordinary tale, or is there something more to it? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss the next stories. See you, if you still dare to watch next time.